Welcome to the Recommended Daily Value Podcast, your daily dose into the health and wellness world.
Welcome back to the Recommended Daily Value Podcast, where we dive into everything health, fitness, and nutrition related 5 days a week in 5 minutes or less. This podcast is brought to you by Umzu, and I'm your host, Tyler Woodward. Today, we're going to do something a bit different, and I'm going to share a somewhat real dialogue based on a conversation I had with some friends this past weekend debating sugar. Now, I wish I was this articulate in real time, but instead I'll give you what I wish I would have said ideally. So here goes. I think sugar is good for you. So you're telling me you think Pop-Tarts, Oreos, Twinkies, etc. are healthy? No, absolutely not. What I'm saying is that I don't think the sugar in them is what's causing the issues. We tend to use sugar as a scapegoat, but in reality there are probably like 30 other chemicals in these foods that we call sugars, like preservatives, additives, fillers, etc. Many of which are problematic, but everyone just blames the sugar and forgets about all these other chemicals in them. Like what? I don't know, how about the oxidized vegetable or seed oils, the emulsifiers like carrageenan and various gums, the dyes used to make them appear a certain color, the artificial flavorings used to give them a specific taste, the preservatives used to make them shelf stable, the genetically modified grains, the pesticides that make it into these foods from those grains, the list goes on. Alright, fair, there's a ton of crap in these foods, but that still doesn't make the sugar in them good for us. What do you think makes sugar so bad for us? Everyone knows sugar is bad. It rots your teeth, it's associated with a ton of diseases, and it's probably, at least in part, causing the obesity epidemic. Well, do you think fruit is bad for us? No, of course not. Fruit is natural. But fruit has sugar in it just like your Pop-Tarts. Yeah, but that sugar is different. No, it's not. If you were to extract all the sugar out of the fruit and out of the Pop-Tarts, the sugar would be exactly the same. The difference is what comes with that sugar. So you think that real sugar is fine, it's just the fake sugar and all the other chemicals that are problematic. Honestly, for a while I would have told you yes, but I really don't think there's that much of a difference between fake and real sugar. For instance, high fructose corn syrup contains usually between 42 to 55% fructose, depending on the type, compared to sugar, which contains 50% fructose, or honey, which can contain as much as 42% fructose. But it's probably a lot more likely that other impurities make it into high fructose corn syrup. So, do you think that it's not the sugar that is inherently bad, rather that we're eating too much of it? Well, I think you could make that argument, but I don't really buy into that fully either. Like, yes, it's right in the sense that you eat too much of anything, you'll gain weight and fat, and that will likely come with a host of issues over time. But we have a much higher capacity to burn sugar for fuel than anything else. Burning sugar for fuel results in a positive feedback loop in our cells, in which they produce more CO2, because burning sugar results in about 30% more CO2 being produced compared to burning fat. And then our cells trade that CO2 with our red blood cells for oxygen that's taken in from the atmosphere. So the more CO2 they produce, the more oxygen they can take in and burn, which is known as the Bohr and Haldane effects. Plus, CO2 is a vasodilator, meaning it opens up more blood flow to flow through to the cells, allowing for an increased exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. And if sugar is so bad for you, then why do so many diseases consist of an inability to burn sugar for fuel? Type 2 diabetes or insulin resistance occurs as a result of Type 2 diabetes or insulin resistance occurs as a result of glucose building up in the blood and not being able to enter the cells, so the cells can't burn it. Scientists are now calling Alzheimer's disease type 3 diabetes because the same concept is occurring. There's an inability to properly burn sugar in the brain. And as far back as the 1920s, Otto Warburg coined the Warburg effect, which is a characteristic of virtually all cancer cells in which they lose the ability to burn glucose normally, like a healthy cell, and instead ferment the sugar into lactate or lactic acid like our primitive bacteria ancestors like yeast. Okay, so if sugar is not the issue, well then what's the blame? Well, I don't think you can put the blame on any one individual thing, but I do think you can make a strong argument that it's a combination of all the things that we're exposed to in unnaturally high quantities that inhibit our body's natural ability to burn glucose or sugar for fuel. Well, a lot of the industrial pollutants today directly interfere with thyroid function, and the thyroid is what regulates overall energy production in the body. Lots of plastics and certain foods mimic estrogen in the body, and excess estrogen can impair cells and our thyroid's ability to function. A lot of the additives in food mess with our gut health and can lead to an increase in endotoxin, which can temporarily impair sugar metabolism and thyroid function. And a high-fat diet, which I think most people are eating today, whether saturated fat or not, can also impair thyroid function and the thyroid ability to transport thyroid molecules. which FYI, a high-fat, high-carb diet is what they usually use to fatten up rats in basically all the nutritional experiments. So when you combine all these factors with the fact that people aren't eating nearly as much nutrient-dense foods, and many of these nutrients that are in those foods are needed to burn sugar, I really don't think it's the sugar's fault, rather all the junk food and chemicals we're exposed to that's interfering with our cells' ability to burn sugar for fuel, which in turn decreases the amount of sugar we're capable of burning, which is like a double-edged sword, or like it's burning the candle at both ends, which is like a double-edged sword or burning the candle at both ends. Well, that's it for this episode. So remember to enjoy your sugar, and remember it's not causing all of the issues inherently on its own. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit that subscribe button and to share it with a friend. And remember that these opinions are my own, based on my own research and experiences, and is not medical advice. Till next time, be good.